Susan Rakowski for this presentation.
Good evening. The 2023 recipient of the Isaac Hecker Award for Social Justice is Fran Ludwig. Since 1974, the Paulist Center community has bestowed this award for extraordinary work for peace and justice. Tonight, Fran joins the company of Dorothy Day, Cesar Chavez, Helen Prejean, Roy Bourgeois, Martin Sheen, and many others who have come to this chapel to accept this award. The award is named for the founder of the Paulist Fathers, Isaac Hecker. Father Hecker was the epitome of a 19th century Jacksonian American. He was born in New York City, the son of immigrants. His mother was a devout Methodist who firmly believed in Wesley's understanding of God's saving grace and on putting faith and love into action. Hecker left school at an early age and partnered with his two brothers to open up two bakeries, invested in a flour mill, and became quite successful. Even though Hecker's German immigrant family moved from the status of skilled workers to business entrepreneurs, they never forgot the plight of workers. These brothers were drawn to politics and joined the reform group known as the Working Man's Movement. This group believed that equal rights to life, liberty, and property should be attainable for everyone, not just the growing monopolies of the day. In his early 20s, Hecker was greatly influenced by the Transcendentalist movement and by good friends like Henry David Thoreau, Margaret Fuller, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and Orestes Brownson. When you read Isaac's writings, his convictions are unambiguous and bold. There is a necessary link between social reform and an intimate relationship with God. At the core of his theology and spirituality is a God who is actively engaged in creation as the omnipresent spirit at work in every soul, in every age and time. This evening, we honor both Isaac Hecker and our Catholic social teachings as we present this treasured award to Fran Ludwig. Fran is a tireless activist leading numerous efforts to engage Catholic communities in the creation care movement. She is the founder and director of the Boston Catholic Climate Movement, the Boston chapter of the Laudato Si movement, among many other things. Her work with American Catholics is twofold: a spiritual contemplative response to God's creation and the assertive action required to protect creation, and especially the marginalized who suffer most from its degradation. Were Isaac Hecker alive today, I trust he and Fran would be hanging out together at Brook Farm, Fruitlands, or Walden Pond, and would have much to discuss. Even before Pope Francis's letter on Care for Our Common Home was published, Fran Ludwig was leading Catholic responses to environmental and social justice causes. Laudato Si was a dramatic statement and summons from the leadership of the Catholic Church. Pope Francis's powerful letter in 2015 issued an invitation and challenge to Catholics to heed the call of creation and the poor. Our recipient has been a leader in shaping the answer to this challenge and in facilitating Massachusetts Catholics to respond. Her strong sense of social justice has made it clear to her that the economically poor are the ones who suffer the most from the effects of climate change. Fran is the founder and current co-chair of the Faith and Environment Committee at Sacred Heart and St. Bridget's parishes in Lexington. She's on the leadership team of the Lexington Global Warming Action Coalition and was a solar coach for Lexington's Solarize program. She is also a climate justice at Boston College group member fighting to mitigate climate change. Fran has spent 50 years as an educator and as the elementary science coordinator for the Lexington Public Schools, teaching people about how Earth's systems work so that her students would grow up to understand and protect their environment. One of her students, environmental activist and author Bill McKibben, has cited her as an inspiration to him. The Paulist Center's Care for Our Common Home ministry was originally inspired not only by the faith response of its community members, but also by the example of Fran and others outside the center, practical leaders responding to Laudato Si. And because of her inspiring work, the Paulist Center is now seen as one of the more active parishes in Massachusetts. Honoring Fran tonight further demonstrates the center's commitment to the values of environmental justice and the importance of the American church taking a stand for those values. Isaac Hecker was committed to faith in action, particularly in the American church. Fran has been tireless in her efforts to protect God's creation by living out productive responses to the environmental and social justice needs of our day, as well as leading Catholic organizations to do the same. The Paulist Center deeply appreciates Fran's ministry in this age and time. We thank you, Fran, for your work and for the example of a concrete lived faith, a model of a life based on hope and compassion. Thank you for being here with us tonight. I would like to invite Trudy McDonald up, who is representing our Creation Care Ministry and presenting the award to Fran.
Fran, I am so proud and I am so proud and thrilled to honor you with this award tonight. The award says the Paulist Center Community's 2023 Isaac Hecker Award for Social Justice is presented to Fran Ludwig for her relentless commitment to a spiritual, contemplative response to God's creation and the assertive action required to protect creation, especially the marginalized suffering most from its degradation. It's presented Saturday, September 28th, 2024. And there's a quote from Isaiah. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Upon those who dwelt in the land of gloom, a light has shone. You have brought them abundant joy and great rejoicing.
Among the many great works that Fran has done for creation, her many years devoted to teaching stand out. And probably her most famous student wanted to send his congratulations. And he has done that in the form of a 1-minute video that we would like to share with you. So you should all be familiar with Bill McKibben. Bill is world-renowned as a person who has spearheaded climate action, has created national advocacy campaigns, and has founded multiple national organizations. Bill learned his middle school science from Fran Ludwig.
Well, Ms. Ludwig, Fran, what a pleasure to get to, just to get to say my own really deep debt of thanks. Since everyone's talking about their experiences with Mr. Waltz and Coach Waltz and things, it won't surprise anyone to hear that I think of you in some ways still as Ms. Ludwig, my science teacher. And the very first small gift you gave the environmental movement perhaps was in inspiring me a very long time ago. Many thanks for that. Many more thanks for the extraordinary work that you've gone on to do, both inside and outside the Catholic realm, in advancing the notion that we need to care for this beautiful planet we've been given. In Laudato Si, Francis talks a great deal about the challenge of all of us that we need to not just understand this, but act on it. And no one I know has acted on it with more fidelity, more power, more wisdom, more consistency, more love than you have. I am so, so grateful, and the planet is enormously grateful. Congratulations on this very deserved award, and I'll see you sign in hand sometime soon. Take care.
Wow, that was a surprise. But you never know, sort of the ripple effect. You never know how you affect other people. And maybe that's, one of my messages today. But thank you so much for this amazing honor. When I see the list of the people who received this, wow, I just don't think I'm in that category. But I have a way to explain that a little bit later. But this has given me an opportunity to kind of reflect on how I came to be a Catholic climate activist. I think it started in Helen Russell's garden, and my family is here, so they know who Helen Russell is. Helen was a dear friend of my mother, but she was also a biology professor at Fitchburg State College in those days. And I remember when I was in the 3rd grade, I visited Helen, and she was out in the garden, and I noticed that in her hand, she had all these little insects crawling around. And I have that strong memory. The insects were aphids. Yeah. She explained with great admiration that these little creatures had reproductive superpowers. If you have a garden, you probably know what that means. But she touched them gently, and she laid them back on the leaf in her garden as sort of a model. And I really remember that. I think that and a lot of wonderful camp experiences with the Girl Scouts made me a nature lover at an early age. But since I've become an adult, in my life, I have found in turn energy, solace, and fascination in plants and animals and rocks and stars. And I've gained a spiritual sense in being outside that is often filled with gratitude to the Creator. It just makes you go to a different place, I think. So that's why I like to be outside. As Pope Francis says, the material universe speaks of God's love, everything as it were a caress of God and a real reflection of God. So when I became a science teacher that Bill referred to, when I became even more aware of the interconnections between living and non-living things in the world, and I made it my mission to teach people about how these things worked in order that they would take care of the earth. Thinking, of course, that they would do it. And we know that that's not necessarily the case at this point, which brings us to another point at the very end. So now I have been retired for a long time, although I still consider myself a science teacher. But I was thrilled last week to lead a nature walk for my 1st grade granddaughter's class. And she's sitting right here. This is Isla. After marveling at ants on some blackberry bushes, ants that were eating aphids. Remember the aphids? Yep. We headed into the woods. Now, her school is situated right on I-95, and there's a little patch of woods behind it. It's really scraggly, a lot of dead trees, and it's actually part of a swamp as well. But it's fascinating. And on our trip, under the spongy logs, we found roly-polies, you know, those little sow bugs that were creeping along on the wood. And then we found a slug. So I picked the slug up in my hand, sort of like Helen, and we watched. And before we knew it, the slug had put out 4 of its tentacles and were waving them around. And the kids were like, oh my gosh. You can even see their little eyeballs at the end of the tentacles. So on the way back to the school, I asked the kids, what do you think would happen if somebody came along and they looked at all of the scraggly trees and the dead stuff and, you know, all these bugs. And they said, well, why don't we just plow it all over and make it into a nice green lawn? And Isla said, with great concern, she said, well, what would happen to all the animals? And that's exactly what we need people to do. We need that wisdom to be able to say, well, you know, how do I impact God's creation by what I do? And what's mine to do to protect it? And that's exactly what Pope Francis is talking about when he talks about eco-conversion. I see Strad, my co-chair for the Boston Catholic Climate Movement here, and he's always saying something about eco-conversion. It's sort of a big buzzword, but all it means is that you see yourself as a human, not you see yourself as a human who is not at the top of the pyramid of living things, the dominators. You see yourself as a part of nature, in the circle of nature, and not apart from it. So that's a whole different mindset, I think, than, you know, really what I grew up with. But it's something that really resonates with me. St. Francis understood it 800 years ago when he spoke about brother sun and sister water. And indigenous people around the globe have had this worldview for eons, and many still do, that we're part of a circle and we need to honor and respect the natural world. In this time when no part of the earth has not been touched by humans because of climate change, we need desperately we really need to have this conversion. And I just want to refer to Bill again, because when he was 28 years old, he wrote a book called The End of Nature. And that was the whole idea. There's no place that hasn't been touched. So if you think of anything that you buy or anything that you use or anything that we're touching or sitting on, it has been mined or harvested, and people have had to do it. And remember our second reading there, the poor guys who, were not paid or whatever. That's a whole other social justice issue. But everything that we have requires energy to be made and transported. And sadly, much of the world's energy is made by burning stuff. And even little kids, Isla could tell you that when you burn stuff, you produce smoke. And it actually turns out that something like 1/5 of the people who die in the world die because they breathe soot, AKA the smoke that you see. But even more so, the stuff that you don't see is important as well. The carbon dioxide, which is invisible, is what's heating up the earth. And this is coming from burning fossil fuels. The Pope is very specific about needing to get off of fossil fuels. And he's basing that on the science, which I love. By the way, he was trained as a chemist. So if anybody, gives you an argument, oh, what's he doing in this area? He knows what he's talking about. So the other thing that you think about is, well, okay, what do you do when you finish with something? When you're all done with it, you throw it away, right? But it turns out that there is no away. And that whole understanding of where things come from, where things go, what you do when you're using something is really, really important. And that's part of that conversion in just the way of thinking about the world. And this is actually pretty countercultural in the US. If you listen to TV, listen to ads, every year they want you to buy a new iPhone, right? You get that ad. It's hard to resist. And I'm not perfect in that at all. I mean, I'm still struggling with, how much plastic I use. But I'm going to paraphrase something that the zero waste people put out. We don't need a handful of people caring for creation perfectly. We need millions of people who are caring for creation imperfectly, but trying to do it. And since there are 1.5 billion Catholics on earth, we have a good chance if we can get that message out. So when in 2015, Pope Francis released his letter to the world, Laudato Si, on care for our common home, I was overjoyed because in reading it, almost everything he said just resonated so strongly. In fact, I think I ran out of marker because I kept marking all the passages, but it's actually summed up in 3 words. It's, maybe 97 pages, 3 words. Everything is connected. And that is what plays out in that document. It's the economy, it's care for the poor, it's care for the planet, all kinds of things. And also the need for education, teaching people, like I learned at Girl Scout camp and like I learned from Helen and from Bill as well. I've learned a lot more from Bill than he probably ever learned from me. So that all of these things are important. The thing that really touched me though, in Laudato Si was when the Pope said, each creature has its own purpose in giving glory to God, apart from its use for humans. And I still see some references to, well, thank you for all these wonderful gifts that we have that, for us. And it's not just for us. So I love that acknowledgement. Pope Francis encourages us to honor this 2-way relationship, giving respect and honor to Mother Earth as she provides to us all that we need to survive, just recognizing that. And if you ask kids where their food comes from, they say the Stop and Shop. It's hard to get that connection in these days because you don't really see where things come from or where they go, actually. So Laudato Si is really, as Strato says, it's really a social justice encyclical. It's not just environmental because it encompasses so much. It encourages us to listen not only to the cry of the earth, but also, as Susan said, to the cry of the poor as well, who are contributing the least amount to climate change and are suffering the most and have the least ability to recover from floods and droughts and things like that. So it was pretty soon after Laudato Si was released that I met a young Argentinian grad student from Harvard by the name of Tomas Insua. And when I met him, he was in the process of starting a group that was had grandiose name of the Global Catholic Climate Movement. And by the way, this group changed its name recently to the Laudato Si movement. But at any rate, nowadays, there are up to 1,000 Catholic organizations that belong to this group and many, many members all around the world. I was excited to hear in 2016 that the group's mission matched my own, that I started with the spiritual connection with nature, I guess with God's creation. I try to consider the impact that I have on others, human and non-human. And then finally, I try to use my voice to speak out against environmental injustice, and degradation. And then the next year, the Boston Catholic Climate Movement was born as the Boston chapter of this global group, one of the first in the country, by the way. I'm happy to say that the members of our group are now collaborating with the Archdiocese of Boston, yay, on a webinar that will happen in October, so you'll hear about that soon, about care for our common home and about how it's really part of our Catholic heritage to care for creation and to do what we can as a moral issue. We're also planning a convocation, a justice convocation, which will take place in March at Boston College High School. So we'll let you know about that. But the Boston Catholic Climate Movement would not be successful without members who are passionate about caring for our common home and all who share in it. And I'm thinking especially of the Paulist Common Home team, which has been so active and so effective. Many of you have been involved in this. I'm just reading Peter McLaughlin's Season of Creation daily reflections that I get in my email, and just marveling at the scope and the meaning that these hold for me. I'm also grateful for the Eucharistic bread bakers here at the Paulist Center who donated bread for our Season of Creation Mass, which happened last week before, at my parish in Lexington, and Trudy McDonald for doing a special delivery of the bread and also cookies for the hospitality afterwards. And also I want to recognize Chris O'Keefe, who's been so active in engaging you in the political aspect and legislation that is so important. Because as much as we try to do our one little thing, it's never going to make it unless we get regulations. Even the Pope says this, you know, that's part of our obligation, is to push the people who are deciding on things. I also want to recognize Bill, yeah, Bill Mitchell, of course. Yeah, who has been very supportive, and Bob Wagoner as well. So many others in the Common Home ministry here at the Paulist Center. And I do have fond memories though of A.E. Serino. Remember her? Yeah. And for your pastor last year, who presided a beautiful Season of Creation Mass and challenged us in his homily, which I appreciate. We don't hear very many homilies about care for creation. So all of this is to say that I would like to share this wonderful award with all of those who have dedicated themselves to caring for our common home and all its inhabitants, from the indigenous people who cared for this land long before our ancestors arrived, but also including my mom's friend Helen Tomas, and almost 1,000 groups, the Catholic groups that are members of the Laudato Si movement, and the creation care teams, especially this team here at the Paulist Center, people who died defending forests in South America, and then of course our beloved Pope Francis, who really, thank God for him. The third piece of this mission of spirituality, looking at your own lifestyle, the third piece is advocacy. And here I have an ask. So what a challenge we have right now in this election season. Shake your head if you think that's really true. I think, yeah. If we think about a consistent ethic of life, if we think about the seamless garment, if we think about Catholic social teaching, the existential challenge of climate change has to be right up there when you're thinking about choosing a candidate. It's not just one thing, it's all of these things together. They all compel us to consider that all of life is sacred, and all that sustains life, air, water, land, is sacred and necessary, and we have to protect it. We know that climate extremes are coming at us like a locomotive speeding along a track. think of that hurricane in the south that we're hearing a lot about, which was amped up by warm ocean water, unusually warm ocean water. In terms of curbing climate change, later is too late. So there really is an urgency for all of us. So I leave you with a call to action. Take some time to appreciate God's creation. And as I was walking over here, look what I found on the comet. Isn't that beautiful? So take some time, slow down, and appreciate what you see. Because that gives you the energy and the love, really, to do the hard work of trying to change things. Be grateful for your life and all that sustained your life that's provided by Mother Earth. And then vote for candidates who will promote the health of our common home and all its creatures, including us, by the way, and all of the other people, all of the future generations, grandkids, kids. Think about that. And then here's your homework. I'm a teacher. I'm going to give you some homework. So your homework is to talk about this with your friends, with your relatives, with your colleagues, and tell them about your concern and the need to think about this when they're choosing their candidates. And of course, in Massachusetts, that's probably not too hard, but reach out to these people in other key states. Can I say key states? Because your trusted voice is powerful. So I'd like to end with the first two words of St. Francis' beautiful prayer, the Canticle of the Creatures. And of course, St. Francis was in Italy and he lived a long time ago. So his first two words are in Old Italian. Those first two words are Laudato Si, praise be. Amen.